criminal justice reform takes center stage in the Senate. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup. This afternoon, lawmakers began debating the First Step Act with the goal of potentially getting it through the Senate floor before the end of the year.
For more now, we turn to Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail, break down some of the key areas of this measure.
Well, this bill has been a long time coming. There are a lot of lawmakers very excited to see it on the Senate floor. And the main goals of this bill are to reduce mandatory minimums, to ramp up prison programs for the inmates, and to really help prisoners acclimate to society once they're free and get back on their feet so they're not dependent on government programs. And initial estimates for this bill show that it plans to reduce federal prison populations by about 53,000 people a year over the next 10 years, which they hope will take some of the burden off taxpayers for paying for these people to be in prison.
Abby, we know, and you've reported extensively, that this bill has bipartisan support, but does it appear to have enough votes to be voted out of the Senate?
Yes, Leader McConnell would not have agreed to bring it to the floor if he didn't already have a strong feeling that it was going to pass. And senators now believe it will pass with strong bipartisan support and possibly see as many as 80 senators vote for it this week.
And while lawmakers in the Senate are debating criminal justice reform, the deadline to reach a funding deal is getting quite close.
Yes, that deadline is Friday. There are 7 unpassed spending bills right now. 6 of them could pass without issue, but the one that is the hang-up is the Department of Homeland Security, and the particular problem there is how much money will go towards funding President Trump's promised border wall. He wants to see $5 billion go towards the border wall, and Democrats do not want to give that to him. So this battle this week could get a little ugly. President Trump has said he will proudly shut down the government if he does not see $5 billion towards the wall in a spending package, but Democrats do not want to give him more than $1.6 billion. So we will watch that play out this week.
And there's not a lot of time here, Abby. Members of the House don't return to session until Wednesday, so this is really cutting it close down to the wire.
Yes, definitely. I think, if anything, and it's important to remember this would just be a partial government shutdown. And if we do see this shutdown happen right before Christmas, DHS would continue, because it's essential. They would still continue to be funded. So that's why some of the threat, it would not be like other shutdowns we've seen. A lot of the essential parts of the government, their funding has already been passed. But this would still look really bad for Republicans because they are still in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House for the next until January. And Republican senators and congressmen do not want to see the shutdown play out. I've heard that they are encouraging President Trump to work towards a compromise, and telling him that this would really spell trouble for them in 2020 if this partial government shutdown happens. So I anticipate a lot of last-minute deals will be worked out towards the end of this week.
All right, Abigail Robertson for us on the Hill. Thank you very much.
Well, the president is calling for bipartisan efforts to deal with health care, tweeting today, "We have a chance working with the Democrats to deliver great health care." Democrats are vowing to appeal a federal judge's decision late last week striking down Obamacare. The judge ruled the individual mandate which funds the law is unconstitutional. President Trump sees the decision, though, as a first step in fixing the Affordable Care Act, while Democrats slam the ruling.
I believe we're going to get really good health care. Exciting things happened over the last 24 hours.
We're going to fight this tooth and nail.
The ruling does not affect any of the 17 million current Obamacare enrollees. Healthcare played a critical role in the midterm elections, and some analysts say the Republicans' failure to fix and replace Obamacare is one reason they lost voters. Even Republicans agree with some provisions of the law, like covering people with pre-existing conditions, saying they should be protected.
The judge's ruling was far too sweeping. He could have taken a much more surgical approach and just struck down the individual mandate and kept the rest of the law intact. I believe that it will be overturned.
The case is expected to end up before the Supreme Court.
Well, Nina Shafer of the Heritage Foundation joins us now to unpack this ruling. Nina, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What's your take? What do you make of the judge's decision, and what do you think it ultimately means for the Affordable Care Act?
Well, certainly it shouldn't be a surprise. As you may remember, this was the same law that then Speaker Pelosi said we needed to pass to find out what was in it. So legislation that's written in such haste typically hits some hurdles, and this is not a surprise that the judge found that the case was that the law itself was unconstitutional.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out it does not take effect. It still has a long way to go before it could potentially do that. What do you foresee? Do you think the Supreme Court will ultimately take this up?
Well, I think that you make a good point. I mean, this case is far from over, and it will have to wind its way through the whole court system. So you're right. We might not know what the end result is at least in the immediate future. We'll have to wait and see what they decide.
Yeah. Do you think the Supreme Court would take it up?
I'm not sure. You know, that's part of the process it's going to have to go through. I think many people are hopeful that the decision will stand and that the health care law will be reconsidered and that new policies can be put in place rather than holding on to the Obamacare structure.
Yeah, Nina, this is a very partisan issue, of course. We've already seen some on the left saying that this ruling will hurt those with pre-existing conditions. Is there any truth to that?
Well, certainly, as you've already pointed out, there's nothing that stops the law today. So those that have coverage today will continue. The administration has also acknowledged that it will continue implementing the health care law as it is today. I think it's important to note, though, that the trap that those on the left tend to put us in is to say that only their solutions are the right solutions. There are numerous ways to help those with pre-existing conditions, and I think the question becomes, is Obamacare really the only and the best way to do it? We've seen what the results of Obamacare have done to the insurance market. It's created great instability. We have premiums continuing to rise, and people have fewer choices than they did before the health care law was enacted. So I think that we really need to start thinking about better solutions that are more tailored to the needs of the people that are receiving the health care in our system rather than just propping up a failed health care law.
Now, health care, huge issues for voters in this year's midterm elections. Nancy Pelosi said because of the Democrats unified around health care, they were able to make gains in the House. That was her reasoning. Your thoughts on that?
I think that's ironic because many of those on the left have actually abandoned the health care law, the Obamacare as it's known today, and have already shifted to say that it was a failure and we need to do something more government regulated and passing laws like single payer Medicare for all. So it's interesting that the dilemma that legislators face today are trying to prop up what everyone acknowledges is a flawed and failed law. And really begin to think about what we want the healthcare system to look like moving forward.
Yeah, if this ruling is upheld, the pressure is really on Republicans and Democrats to come up with something to fill that vacuum. How should lawmakers, Nina, look to fix the whole healthcare issue in America?
Well, I think they need to acknowledge that a Washington solution has really failed the American people. It is very difficult for people in Washington, whether it's in the administration or in Congress, to actually know what's going to work in Washington State or Florida, where we have a very diverse population in the country. And we need to make sure that the policies that are advocated and advanced in our country actually are able to meet the needs of individuals across our country. The best solution for that is really to start giving states the authority over their healthcare systems. They're closest to the problems, and they probably have better solutions than a one-size-Washington-all solution.
Nina Shafer with the Heritage Foundation, thank you very much. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And to the president now and the onslaught of investigations that he and his administration are facing following his former personal attorney's sentencing Michael Cohen, and a lot of talk about campaign finance violations. Democrats have been raising the prospect of impeachment and even jail time for President Trump.
But on Sunday, Democrats struck a decidedly different tone.
Our major thing right now is to let Mr. Mueller, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, do his job. Let him complete his job. then we take a look at what he says and then go from there. But I think it's actually premature right now to do that, but the evidence is certainly piling up.
We should make sure that Mr. Mueller is unimpeded, that he finishes his investigation, and we should make sure that that report is public. And then we should make a decision.
The special counsel's report is an investigation are so important, and the special counsel must be allowed to complete his work unimpeded.
A nice little medley there. Here to help us explain the about face is our chief political analyst, David Brody. David, explain this little bit of about face or walk back with impeachment. What's going on here?
Well, they've Googled impeachment in 1998 and came to Wikipedia, which is where we all go for all of our facts, and they found out that it didn't work too well for the Republicans, and that's a big part of the issue. So they have to dial this back a little bit, and I want to play you both a soundbite from Nancy Pelosi. Ready for this? 1998, so what is that? 20 years. Thank you. Thanks for the math, Jenna. 20 years ago, this is what Nancy Pelosi said about President Clinton at the time in terms of the Republicans, and she was frustrated with the party. Take a look at what she said.
The Republicans in the House are paralyzed with hatred of President Clinton, and until the Republicans free themselves of this hatred, our country will suffer.
And so that's the issue. Specifically, let me just read you that soundbite again. What if she had said this? Or what if, I should say, what if this was said today? Democrats in the House are paralyzed with hatred of President Trump. And until the Democrats free themselves of this hatred, our country will suffer. See, the point simply is that this is what the Democrats today are afraid of, what Nancy Pelosi was saying back then.
Yeah, in impeachment, they were talking about that in 98. David, though, that didn't work out so well for the Republicans,
Not at all. Not at all. Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House. Remember the contract with America in 1994? Well, guess what? 1998, they impeached President Clinton in December. They actually impeached President Clinton in a lame duck session of Congress, believe it or not. That was in December of 1998. In November of 1998, those midterm elections, House Republicans lost 5 seats. They thought they were going to win 40 seats because they were talking about impeachment. We're going to impeach the president. They lost 5 seats. Then in 2000, which is really what's interesting, is that the Democrats gained 4 Senate seats in 2000. So this was not good. Also, take a look at this statistic real quick. 58% unfavorability rating for Republicans at the time in 1998. It was the worst since 1984. So once again, this is what the Democrats fear as they move forward potentially on impeachment.
David, how much do you think impeachment today has legs?
It's going to be interesting to watch. It's political, for sure. I mean, think about this for a moment. It was all about Russian collusion with the Democrats, right? For 2+ years, Russia, Russia, Russia. And what ends up happening, they might impeach him over what? Campaign finance reform? Over disputed campaign finance reform violations. Look, I have to tell you, if you look at the statistics today, 57% of independents say they do not want President Trump impeached. That's a number they have to remember. Now, Democrats, 78% of Democrats want President Trump impeached, shockingly. 94% of Republicans don't want President Trump impeached. But the independent number, 57%, if they don't want him impeached, Democrats might have a political problem if they go forward with this.
Real quick question for you, David. You know, Democrats have been talking about the protection, legislative protection for special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. What does that mean legislatively as we move into the new session with Democrats in control of the House?
Right, absolutely nothing, because here's what's going to happen. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats will pass a Protect Robert Mueller bill, protect the investigation, and guess what? Mitch McConnell will say, yeah, thanks, Nancy, but it's not happening in the Senate. Not going to happen. He has blocked the Coons flake bill already in the Senate that they wanted to do, and now 53 Republican senators in the Senate. There's no way Mitch McConnell is, he's not going to let it go through. So Nancy can knock herself out, if you will. Chuck and Nancy can knock themselves out, and Mitch McConnell will be the roadblock to that.
All right, David Brody, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Well, coming up, why it is becoming harder for companies to fill those blue-collar jobs across the country.
Well, it was another day of big losses on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed down just over 500 points. The market saw its lowest close for the year.
Well, there is growing concern over the economy in America as we head into the new year. More Americans think the economy will get worse in 2019. A new NBC Wall Street Journal poll finds 33% think there will be an economic downturn, while only 28% say they think the economy will do better next year. Those numbers are pretty much flipped from the start of this year, when 35% of people thought the economy would get better in 2018, while 20% thought it would get worse.
And Dan Celia is the president and CEO of Financial Issues Stewardship Ministries. He joins us now. Dan, thanks for being with us.
Sure thing, John. Glad to be here.
Well, Dan, as we get ready to close out the year, let's take a look back and reflect. How do you think the economy is doing at the end of 2018 compared to the beginning of the year?
I think it's very strong right now at the end of the year. I think the economy now has tapped on the brakes a little bit, maybe slowed, just more in slowing of confidence, maybe a little bit of business investment that they had anticipated, businesses had anticipated spending that are maybe holding back a little bit. But all in all, the fundamentals of the economy are about as strong as we've seen in about 14 years.
Well, recently here, it seems like nearly every day Wall Street seems to be closing on the downward turn. Do you think Americans should be concerned about that?
Well, I don't think so yet. We shouldn't be concerned when we have such good fundamentals in the economy. So the way it's supposed to go, John, is the economy is supposed to drive the markets, not the markets drive the economy. Mm-hmm. And the economy, for the first time in probably 12 years, has in fact been driving the markets. The problem is there's so much negativity in the news media that people start to equate that negativity to reality, and it just isn't reality. So I don't think we can be concerned on the short term, not concerned enough to change our 401ks or our IRAs or any of those things. Just stay on course. Of course, we have a Fed rate hike potentially coming up, and we're going to hear what the Fed says about being a little bit more dovish in 2019, I hope. And that's going to help the markets. And it looks like we're making some headway in trade. So a lot of the anxiousness on the way down could be going away early next year, second quarter next year.
I think someone must have slipped you a tip sheet, because you just referenced my next question. You had just mentioned the Federal Reserve meeting this week. If they do decide to raise interest rates, how is that going to affect things?
Well, if they decide to raise, which is what the majority of the camp is in, I am not, but I'm just sticking to my guns of what I said from the beginning of the year. If they raise, we're going to see, obviously, these lows that we've seen in the markets go lower. We are going to see some new lows. There's no doubt about it. I don't think it's going to last long, but we're going to see it. If they don't raise rates, then I think we're not going to see new highs, but we're going to start to see a pickup in the market, and the dollar will get a little bit weaker, which could be good for some areas of the market. So if they raise, we're going to see new lows, no doubt about it.
Do you think Americans should be optimistic about the economy as we head into 2019? Are you optimistic?
I'm optimistic heading into 2019, but that's based on some geopolitical events falling into place, and we can get a trade deal. So I think Americans should be optimistic. Right now, we still have a whole lot more job openings than we have people to fill them. And that's a good thing for the economy, but that could also be a headwind moving into 2020 if it persists.
Dan Celia with Financial Issues Stewardship, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, John. I appreciate it.
Well, there is a growing gap in America's workforce. Fewer people are equipped for doing what are often called blue-collar jobs. Now companies and schools are trying to fill that void. As Mark Martin shows us, their mission is to train workers in the skilled trades.
Pursuing a traditional college degree isn't for everyone, especially these days.
We each have our own set of interests, our own set of skills, and a different set of drivers in regards to what makes us happy and what makes us feel fulfilled.
Taking that path can also help our nation's economy. National estimates indicate that over the next 10 years, nearly 3.5 million manufacturing jobs will probably be needed. But get this, 2 million of those may remain unfilled because of a skills gap.
It's a global issue that we're seeing. It's definitely something they see in Europe as well. So it is very, very serious.
Lorraine Wagner, Vice President of Operations for Steel, an international company which produces outdoor power equipment, says today's applicants don't have the technical skill sets required. She believes it stems from a stigma against manufacturing, that it's industrial revolution kind of work, dirty and grimy, something to avoid.
And I think that something that we at Steel are trying to do is promote that industry itself and manufacturing is a very fun, dynamic environment to be in. It's very high tech, and it is something where we need to bridge the gap of the years where people have decided, oh, we just want to go to college, we really don't want to follow an apprenticeship program that we used to do years ago. We think college is far more important, and really it isn't. There are different routes that people can take.
Steel is trying to close the gap through its apprenticeship program. Apprentices learn skills including mechatronics, a combination of mechanical and electrical engineering. Coordinator Skip Johnson says the program is working.
Steel's making a huge difference, because not only do we train apprentices for our openings here, but we have opened this apprenticeship program where we accept apprentices from other companies.
I'm here in what's called the Apprentice Lab, the place where the apprentices go through a skilled trades boot camp. It's here where they learn the basics of their craft before more extensive training on the manufacturing floor. Ryan Buzzy is a third-year apprentice.
It fits me because, you know, when I go out to a machine and let's say the machine has a problem, I want to know why, and I want to know exactly what caused it and how it can be prevented in the future. If that means creating a new part or rewiring something new into the machine to prevent it from possibly breaking again or becoming more efficient, I would love to. That's what I pursue this career for.
Vocational schools like this one in Suffolk, Virginia, are also reaching out to students not taking the college route. The College and Career Academy at Pruden offers a variety of programs to high school juniors and seniors. Programs like utility heavy construction, where students, among other things, learn to operate heavy equipment.
I feel strongly about it because in talking to employers, I realize that there's a big need for heavy equipment operators. A lot of the older generation, they're starting to retire, and they have a big need for the new people, the new generation rather, to step in and kind of just take the reins.
President Donald Trump acknowledged the skilled trade gap earlier this year by establishing the National Council for the American Worker. One of its goals, to prepare Americans for the 21st century economy and the emerging industries of the future.
It's going to take a long time. I mean, the gap didn't occur overnight. The gap has occurred because we have moved away from that, but I think by companies such as Steel, who are really driving apprenticeship program, driving the awareness of what manufacturing truly is, yes, eventually the gap will be closed.
Mark Martin, CBN News, Virginia Beach and Suffolk, Virginia.
And when we come back, we'll look at the government's plan to relax a tax rule affecting churches.
Christmas traditions fill our homes and hearts with special moments of joy. Now, from CBN Documentaries, filmed in 8 countries, Christmas, the story behind the traditions, takes you around the world to discover the history of Christmas and the meaning behind the traditions you love to celebrate. It's our gift to you when you send a special gift of $25 or more to bless people in need this holiday season. Plus, we'll rush you an exclusive holiday treasure, Pat Robertson's recording of A Christmas Carol. You'll love listening to this Christmas classic with your family and friends. Get your copy of Christmas, the story behind the traditions, and A Christmas Carol, recorded by Pat Robertson. It's our way of saying thank you for your gift of $25 or more to help people in need this holiday. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com today.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Well, the 2017 Republican Tax Cut and Jobs Act aims to put more money in Americans' pockets.
But it also has a provision that costs ministries a lot of money and chaos and confusion. The tax plan imposes a 21% tax on nonprofits like churches for providing employees with parking and other benefits.
Earlier, we sat down with Johnny Moore, an evangelical advisor to President Trump, who's confident this provision will soon be cut out of the law.
I don't know how it got in there, but it's got to go. And the good news is that a really unprecedented coalition of nonprofit and religious organizations, liberal and conservative, evangelical and Catholic, Jewish and Muslim, I mean, you name it, universities, hospitals, everybody is in concerted opposition to this. And it looks like that several of the key people, sponsors, in fact, Republicans that put it in, have flipped on it. And so hopefully, very, very soon, this little kerfuffle will be behind us. But we can't let up pressure now. Every member of Congress needs to hear from every person who cares about their church or their nonprofit.
And Johnny hopes this provision will be done away with by the end of the year. And tomorrow, more from Johnny. He's very passionate about Christian persecution in China, and he just wrote a letter to the president of that country, President Xi. So we will talk to him about that.
Can't wait to see that interview. Great work with Johnny Moore.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.